The name's Bond. James Bond.
Reboots are often a fairly normal part of a franchise's life, and the James Bond franchise has had several. With Bond, the changes mostly come via a new lead actor, a slightly different tone, and different aspects of Bond's character that are pushed to the forefront. For example, Timothy Dalton was chosen to show a darker, more serious version of the character, in opposition to the lighter, more adventurous version played by Roger Moore. These changes are never usually highlighted within the film itself in order to create a smooth transition. You want to reassure audiences that you're essentially watching a Bond film, even if there will be differences. This is where Casino Royale comes in. The then reboot of the franchise was the largest yet, and essentially changed Bond into a totally different series. So how do you communicate to the audience that this is basically a different character, a different tone, and that you should have different expectations? This video is going to be slightly different to my other ones because for this, I'll mostly be focusing on the opening pre-title sequence of Casino Royale, rather than the entire film. I have several reasons. Firstly is the broader context of what this opening is trying to say in regard to James Bond himself. The film before this, Die Another Day, was received incredibly badly by audiences and critics, and seen as the franchise losing its way. While I do enjoy it, I admit I do see where people are coming from, as it is a low in what's generally a consistent film franchise. The filmmakers and Eon wanted to show people that this was a different Bond to what we'd seen before, both stylistically and literally, as a different actor is now playing him. So they've decided to really up their game when it comes to introducing what's essentially a new character, and I feel that there's a lot to talk about. Secondly, pre-title sequences in Bond tend to act as mini-narratives, so often they're far removed from the actual narrative in the film, and this one is no exception. It's almost like a short film that has a very different visual language from the rest of Casino Royale, so I feel this warrants a separate analysis. Finally, I just feel that there's already a lot to talk about, and I don't want to make my video too bloated, so let's begin. We fade in and start with a low-angle shot of an office building where a car pulls up outside of it. Something to note straight away is the black and white colour grade. It immediately gives the opening a sense of intrigue and makes it seem more like a scene from a film noir. I do feel that the titles establishing the location are pretty unnecessary here, as just dropping the audience into an unknown time and location could have been quite an interesting thing to do. Maybe this is a reach, but I've always thought not giving us a date might have been an intentional effort to make this feel like it could have taken place at a different decade rather than the modern day the rest of the setting is. Almost like a kind of subtle hint that this is a Bond film that's getting back to the roots of the source material. The next shot shows a subject getting out of the car, an older man. He's shown in a medium shot so we can get a good look at his face and expression. It's important we get to know this character because he's an essential part of this pre-title sequence. The skewed angle also presents a sense of unease, which coupled with the character's expression lets us know something is going on. Another low angle of an elevator going up that flows into a close-up of the older man standing with a more stoic expression than before. The use of movement in this transition is great as it helps give the scene a sense of momentum. We see that he is staring at the floor numbers changing, which gives the impression he's almost willing them to move faster. He strides through the building with the camera slowly trailing him, which gives off a type of voyeurism. A low angle shows us him entering an office and the camera pans to follow him walking behind a desk and seeing that his safe has been broken into. This movement also obscures half the frame by placing the lens behind a chair. We get two close-ups quickly cut together to show the man's shock at the open safe, and in a quick pan as another man in the room is revealed. The quick pan is a nice touch showcasing the shock and confusion of the moment. We get a low-angle medium close-up of our main character, James Bond. I love this shot of Bond as he sits in the chair. He feels very powerful and in control because of how he's framed. It's distinct from the previous use of the low angle on Dryden, who thankfully is now named here. Before it underscored a sense of paranoia that he might have been caught selling secrets, which is confirmed here through the dialogue. Another medium on Dryden as he moves into the next frame directly opposite Bond. They're on different sides of the frame, but there's a kind of understanding which is being visually phrased here. Dryden already knows that the gig is up, but he's still going to try and one-up Bond. As he sits down, we're shown a quick close-up of him opening the drawer to reveal a gun, and then another low angle of him sitting down. The balance of power is shifted back to him, so Bond isn't shown in the frame at all, like he isn't considered a threat now. As Dryden mentions M sending a 00, we cut back to the previous angle, showing the two of them sitting opposite each other. I think this is a subtle foreshadowing that Bond's about to shift the balance of power back over to himself by revealing some information. Dryden is again shot in a low angle as he cockily dismisses Bond as he has no kills on his record, and as soon as he mentions the number 2 we cut back to the previous angle on Bond, transitioning the power back to him. We smash cut into a sequence where Bond is fighting the informant who told him about Dryden. Making the film grainier here is a great choice for 2 reasons. One, it's a good way of showing Bond's headspace as he's fighting for his life and this is the first time he ever kills someone, so we know by the quick cutting it's an intense moment for him. Secondly, it's a good visual way of showing that this is from an earlier point before the conversation with Dryden. Maybe it's just me, but I feel the starkness of the image just makes it feel like an earlier moment. The camera work in this sequence is frenetic, and I believe it's handheld, which gives the fight a sense of desperation and lack of control. It's a great contrast to the scene in the office, which we smash cut back to with only a few frames inserted to show Dryden picking up the gun and pointing it at Bond. The use of the same shot and angle on Bond here again is also really inspired, as it's conveying how everything is going just according to plan, and even having a gun drawn on him doesn't really faze him, which gives us a taste of Bond's history in these sorts of scenarios. It also highlights an aspect of Bond's character that's going to be tested and deconstructed for the rest of the film, which is his arrogance. We cut to a closer shot of Dryden pointing the gun at Bond. The close-up is a great punctuation of how he thinks he's won.
Shame. We barely got to know each other.
A closer angle on Bond and a Dutch tilt to really hammer in that Dryden is screwed. We cut back to Bond fighting the informant, and I've always been struck by this moment where he holds the man's head in the sink to drown him. It's obviously pretty brutal, but having the camera framed on Bond as he screws up his face from the sheer effort of killing this guy has always been a great contrast to previous versions of the character. When Roger Moore or Pierce Brosnan were killing people, it was dispassionate and often followed by a pun or quip.
Always did enjoy a good squeeze.
This is about as far removed as you can get from that, and it's a fantastic way of showing that this Bond is not the same as the others. And coupled with this shot as he stares in contemplation of what he thinks is a dead man, really sells us the idea that this was his first time doing that. There's also a subtle little wobble here that, while I know it's because someone is physically holding the camera, it replicates a sense of nausea or dizziness that he may be feeling. We cut back to the steady shot of Dryden as he revels in trying to make Bond feel uncomfortable at having killed someone. We then get the closing line as Bond finishes Dryden's thought by shooting him dead. The close-up on Bond is still unwavering as he has now become a 00 agent and now feels no remorse at having to take a life. As he shoots Dryden, we get a couple of frames that show him knocking a family photo onto the floor as he falls dead. This was always an interesting little detail, as I think it's meant to make you think twice about Bond's actions here. That while yes, he is killing a traitor to MI6 who was selling secrets, he doesn't hesitate, and now somewhere out there is a family now missing a member. The scene ends as we cut back to the bathroom where Bond is picking up the gun he dropped in the fight. The drowned man suddenly regains consciousness, so Bond spins around and shoots him dead, which is framed as the iconic gun barrel sequence. We transition into the title as blood falls down the frame, bringing colour into the film. We learn so much about Bond in this small section. It's almost a microcosm of the themes of the film, and while this does represent a victory for Bond as he's now a fully fledged member, he's lost a small part of his soul, which is something he mentions to Vesper later.
Like you said, you do what I do for too long, and there won't be any soul left to salvage. I'm leaving with what little I have left.
I think it's by design we see more of Dryden in this opening scene than we do of Bond. I think by spending more time with him he's more humanised, so when Bond kills him, we get to see how dehumanised Bond is. There's a reason M calls him a blunt instrument, and this is slightly why. It's the start of Bond's arc that lasts through his other films and culminates in the ending of No Time to Die. Sometimes you should try to cover a lot of ground visually in establishing character, but I think this opening does strike a good balance of being quickly paced, while also using some incredibly smart shot choices to convey a lot of information as concisely as possible. Casino Royale had a huge challenge in front of it. It had to quickly hook audiences in with a different approach, and also keep them on board with a different filmmaking style and tone. For many people, Casino Royale is the peak of the Bond franchise, and this is an opinion I share. Hopefully I've managed to communicate some of the love I have for this film into this video, and made you want to watch it just one more time.